Well, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us in this celebration of Joe's life. I'm going to get closer. Tell me if you can't hear me, just wave or something.
We can hear you.
When you're
great.
closer.
When I'm closer, okay. He'd be just so honored and probably surprised by the amount of people who are here, although half of them are family, so, you know, but it still counts. There are lots of you, and due to time constraints, we're limiting speakers at this point because we might be here till midnight if everybody who wanted to say something about Joe was able to stand up here. But we are going to have our videographer available after this part during lunch and socializing so that we'd love to have you share some of your memories and thoughts about Joe. It'd be wonderful for the family to be able to have those to savor at a later date. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Joe and I met 39 years ago, strictly by chance, the way most things that are great in life happen. We were both invited to the same holiday party, and Joe was invited. I was invited because it was given by a coworker of mine named Vivian, and Joe was invited by his dear friend Mike Corey, who knew Vivian and was hoping that there might be a spark between Joe and Vivian. So I arrived. Joe actually, he told me later, he arrived early, very early for the party. He came to a BYOB party without a B, and then asked Vivian if she had any vodka, and then proceeded to try and make small talk while she was preparing for the arrival of all of her other guests. So it got off to a rocky start. But fortunately, or she might be standing here. Anyway, I came much later, and being newly single, I came by myself and not really savvy about the dating scene. So I walked into a room filled with 1979, very kind of hip, lots of gold chains, chest hair, shirts down to the waist, and I immediately panicked and decided I needed to seek refuge, safe refuge in the kitchen, where I ended up standing next to an older gentleman. And at that time, I learned later, he was 53 and I was 35, and due to our obvious age difference, I didn't have any of the angst that usually accompanies potential romantic relationships. So we just started a very comfortable, intelligent, witty, fun conversation, which lasted through the evening and into the next 39 years. So that was the beginning, and this is the end. But I, look at my notes here, sorry. I just want to share some of the things I learned about that amazing person as our relationship blossomed. Well, you all know how great he was, but just gather myself here. Joe and I used to laugh about the saying, big hat, no cattle. Joe had the cattle, but never wore a big hat or had a big head. Those who met him, not knowing of his many accomplishments, would think that he was just an ordinary Joe, but he was far from ordinary. Closer, my coach. He was a unique combination of qualities, confident and so comfortable in his own skin, but he was never egotistical or conceited. He didn't have a different persona for different people or different situations. He was the same person, whether he was talking to the garbage collector or the bank president. And he always treated everybody with great dignity and respect. He also was a great listener. He would always say, you don't learn anything from talking, you learn from listening, which I'm working on. But, no, I find myself trying to channel some of his qualities, and I'll be in a conversation, and I'm kind of a hummingbird, so I'll be thinking about what I'm going to say or what. I like that. It helped me. A little comic relief here. Anyway, I oftentimes find myself thinking about my response or what I'm going to do in 10 minutes or whatever. And I find myself now just remembering Joe and saying, stop, just stop and listen and be in the moment and learn from what somebody's sharing with you. And Joe was just a great listener. So many people, after his passing, echoed the same sentiment. They said, you know, when he was talking to them, they felt like they were the only person in the room. And because of that ability, people were very comfortable sharing their feelings and exploring their thoughts. And Joe was not a gossip. That was one of his rules. So anybody who shared anything with him knew that it was safe, and they could be as open as they wanted to be. Also, Joe's love for his family and friends was paramount in his life. As you probably all know, you're here, and you know what kind of person he was. So many of us flourished with his love and support. He was my greatest cheerleader, and the same for his children and my children and family members. He didn't try to mold people, which was so lovely. He just tried to encourage people to find their innate qualities and let those blossom. So he did it for me, he did it for my children, he did it for his children, friends. It was a great gift. There's so many of us here who wouldn't be the people we are today if we hadn't known Joe. Although Joe was fiscally conservative, he was incredibly generous to family and friends and those in need. He was a great supporter of the underdog, and he never forgot how privileged he was to have a happy childhood and a loving family, and those who instilled an amazing work ethic and a love of business. Joe's just loved, he was an entrepreneur. He just loved business. He loved having an idea and growing it into a successful business, whether it was a car wash, a self-serve gas station, a radio station, an amusement park, or billboards. It was just something that he loved doing, and he accomplished a tremendous amount, but not without hard work. He never got anything on a silver platter. He wasn't a coupon clipper, as he used to refer to some people. In closing, let's see. And Mike Curry, Pete's here. Pete's Mike Curry's son. Mike Curry once said to me when I was being my typical snarky self, you know, Carol, the luckiest day of your life was when you met Joe Zukin. Put me in my place, and it was absolutely right. It was the luckiest day of my life. I thought about getting a tattoo in memory of my time with Joe, and I realized that I really don't need a physical token of the love that we had for each other, because he really made an indelible mark on my soul. And even though his physical presence is gone, I know he's still with me. And when I'm out in the garden and I see a hawk circling overhead, or a butterfly appearing out of nowhere, or a dandelion catches my eye and I remember that yellow is Joe's favorite color, then I know he's still with me, and he'll never be forgotten. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Peggy.
Peggy, you're up.
For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Peggy Zukin, and I was invited to share a little bit about the first part of Joe's adult life. Joe and I met in 1946 at college. I was a freshman. He had just returned from the service, very dashing 20-year-old, and of course I was smitten. We were actually on a blind date that was arranged by mutual friends, and I think we went to a basketball game so he could check me out, see if I was somebody he wanted to date again. So we dated all through college and got married after my junior year, the year he graduated. And he had some time to kill, so while he was waiting for me to graduate before we moved down to LA, he built a serve-yourself gas station because there weren't any in Northern California, and that bothered him. So we moved then down to LA after I graduated, and the intent was to go to work for Joe Sr. in his business. Big Joe had been waiting for young Joe to come down and take over. Well, after about 5 minutes, Joe figured out he didn't want to be in Joe Sr.'s business. So we had a year lease on our apartment, and so he had to do something while he was waiting to move back up to Northern California to get back into whatever was coming next. So he and his friend Jack Barnes went to work for GMAC, repossessing cars. It was a pretty hilarious time in our life because they would plan all these forays out into the east side of LA that they would go on in the middle of the night. And Jack's wife and I would be sitting there worrying to death that they were going to get killed while they were stealing somebody's car. So we moved back to Northern California, and that's when Joe got started building the car wash. He had seen that there were car washes in LA and thought we should have one up here. And he was right, it was hugely successful. And he and Glenn Holtby then started a partnership that they continued in for quite a while. By the way, he'd known Glenn since they were in kindergarten together or nursery school or whatever. And anyway, so after that, he had this great idea that maybe Northern California also needed a amusement park, a family theme park. So hence Frontier Village. So my time with Joe, I was busy having babies. We had 5 kids, so we were building our family, and Joe was building his businesses, and we were both very, very, very busy. And after about 30 years of this, we were so busy doing our own thing that our marriage died. So we were both sad to see it die, but the upshot was he met Carol, which was probably the next best thing that ever happened to Joe. And it's been wonderful because Carol has been more than gracious, and we have become friends, and our families have, as a result of this, been able to blend and get to know one another. Joe, of those 5 kids, in case you don't know the history, we have 15 grandkids, and now we have 22 great-grandkids, and a whole bunch of, half the audience is. So we used to laugh when we go to gatherings, and there'd be 50 people in the room, and we'd look at each other and say, look what we've done. So we are both very, very proud of our family, and love our family and our kids and grandkids and now great-grandkids. And toward the end of his life, Joe would call, and we would just talk about the kids. I mean, when you're almost 90 years old, there's nobody else to talk to about those things that happened 90 years ago. So we would talk to each other and brag about our kids to one another. And so he was able to say that, how grateful he was that even though our marriage had failed, our family continued to thrive, and it does continue to thrive. And for that, we are incredibly grateful. And it's wonderful to see you all here. Obviously, you all love Joe too, and I love Joe too. Thanks.
I know. I'm Chris Zukin, Joe's oldest son. Dad was a complex, talented, and experienced man. And my sister will give a eulogy next, but I'm going to and she'll give you the whole story of his life. I want to relate to you what comes to mind when I think of him, the scenes, the phrases, and the traits. Dad was an entrepreneur and a businessman. He started 3 businesses from scratch: Sharon Oil Company, Frontier Village, and Zukin Memorial Construction. He also bought businesses. He got in the billboard business in the mid-'60s when he bought Cleveland Outdoor Advertising in Merced. He later bought a couple radio stations. He also dabbled in real estate. He loved all business, but he loved the billboard business the best. I can hear him say, "It's a great business." It really is. You heard that just then, didn't you? Dad was curious. He would read every manual for every car, camera, or electronic gadget that he owned. He was curious about people too. He would engage new people or strangers in long, exploratory conversations. His good friend Glenn Hopi would say, "Joe kept asking stupid questions until he was the smartest guy in the room." Dad was patient. Does anyone remember Dad saying, "There's always another streetcar"? He would wait for the right deal, the right price to come along. Dad loved details. One trait that Dad never deviated from was his love for and attention to detail. He saw details. The transposed number on a P&L, an improperly used word in a letter or an email, rust on a billboard column, the knotted kerchief on the wrong side of the collar of a Frontier Village employee. And I bet the Frontier Village people here could probably name a few hundred more examples of Dad's attention to detail. Mixed with his love for detail was his sense of style, his good taste, class, his good manners. Dad and I were walking through the general store at Frontier Village. I was 11 or 12. Marty, the concessionaire, was there with us, and we were looking over the merchandise. Dad was making positive comments about the quality and the variety of the things for sale. We came upon a bin full of brown plastic dog poop piles. We stopped. I thought they looked pretty fun. I was thinking of the many ways I could utilize this merchandise. Remember, I was 12 years old. Dad looked at the bin and said something like, "Marty, this item isn't appropriate for Frontier Village. Would you please remove it from the store?" Plastic dog poop was not present on subsequent visits to the general store. Dad's integrity. It is sometimes tempting in life and in business to not be completely honest. Dad successfully resisted this temptation. The motto he taught us was, always tell the truth, then you don't have to remember what you told someone. When dealing in a gray area, Dad always erred to the benefit of the customer or the other person. Dad was tough. He was honest but fair. He was honest and fair, but he was not a pansy. He was a repo man, for goodness sakes. Dad had rules and boundaries, strong principles, and he would not allow himself to be taken advantage of. When he felt he was right, he would fight to prove it. I think of the antitrust lawsuit with Big Oil in the early 60s and the battle that he had with 3M in Fresno in the 1970s. My wife Judy reminded me this morning of the psychic that advertised on one of our Bay Area billboards in the early 80s. I think he talked to me about that the week he'd passed. He was still trying to collect the money that she never paid. Dad was a great teacher, mentor, leader, and father. It was fun to be in business with him. We would talk about an issue or a problem or an opportunity, and I would always come away from those conversations smarter and more prepared to deal with the matter at hand. I will miss those conversations. I will miss Dad. I'm still under time. I'm still good. When Dad spoke at Glenn Hopi's memorial, he talked about his conversations with Glenn about God in heaven. Dad said that he knew that Glenn was in heaven now. Well, I believe in God, and I know that God loved Dad. And I know that God loves all of you too. And I believe that Dad is in heaven with Glenn and God.
I'm Ann Alisa, and I'm the oldest daughter. Joseph Zukin was born on January 13th, 1926, to Joseph Zukin and Helen Pauline Niederlander. His parents met at Joseph Zukin of California. Am I okay? Met at Joseph Zukin of California, my grandpa's clothing manufacturing company in Los Angeles. Grandpa was the owner and CEO, and in his late 30s. Grandma had grown up in Peoria, Illinois, and moved to Los Angeles after her father died. Grandma, in her late teens, signed up for dance lessons. There was this call at the dance studio for models at Joseph Zukin of California. She went in and was hired. She became a favorite model. Grandpa said everything looked better on Helen. They were married in 1925. Some of our dad's earliest memories are growing up in the castle, the home Grandpa built in 1918. It is now part of the Brentwood School on Salt Air and Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. Dad shared a room with his brother, Bob. To get to their room, they had to come upstairs, walk through their parents' room, then through the bathroom, and then to their bedroom. He remembered playing with the train set, blocks, Tinker Toys, and an erector set, and throwing the cat out the second-story window with a parachute made out of a handkerchief. His mother read to them incessantly until they could read to themselves. Dad would say, kids should be read to so they become readers. The beginning of Dad's entrepreneurial life, long pattern, started when he and his brother Bob started their own egg business. They bought a few hens and a rooster, even an incubator. They hatched and raised chicks, bought their own chicken feed, and sold eggs to their neighbors. They also had a vegetable stand. This is when they were like 5 and 6 and 7 years old. Dad went to elementary school at the UCLA Laboratory School. That's where he first met Glenn Holby, his lifelong friend. And I know there's other people here, like the Smiths are here, who were long friends too. I'm sorry, not mentioning them too, but we're so glad that they're here. In 5th grade, Dad started at Black Fox, a military type of boarding school. He was there for 4 years. He loved it. That was where Dad said he learned to love math. He also played water polo there. After leaving Black Fox, Dad attended Ralph Waldo Emerson Junior High in Los Angeles. He played speedball there, a game like soccer. He attended University High School in Los Angeles, the Sawtell area, where he played football and was on the track team. He was the shot putter. He said he was an average student and got C's once in a while. He loved math, but didn't like Latin. Dad graduated from high school in 1943 when he was 17. He had skipped a year and wouldn't turn 18 until January of 1944. Dad really wanted to go into the Air Force, but they wouldn't take him because he was colorblind. So he enlisted in the Army while he was still in high school, but was able to complete his freshman year of college before having to report for duty. So he was inducted into the Army in 1944 after 1 year at Stanford. Dad had gotten a good score on the Army General Intelligence test, so he was asked if he'd like to go to Officer Candidate School. You bet I said yes, he told me. So instead of being sent to Germany, as they were building up for the Battle of the Bulge, he was sent to OCS in October of 1944 and became a 90-day wonder. About 2 weeks into OCS training, Dad got poison ivy and had to spend time in the hospital. Since he had missed so much of the training, he had to start OCS training all over again. The group he had started with were sent to Germany and to the South Pacific while the war was still going on. By the time Dad graduated from OCS school and was commissioned in May of 1945, the war had ended in Germany. He always used to say that the poison ivy may have saved his life. After he finished his OCS training, he went to Fort Robinson in Arkansas and trained troops on the BAR, the Browning automatic rifle. In September of 1945, just after the war in Japan had ended, he was sent to Traunstein, Germany as part of the occupational forces. Some of his responsibilities included payroll and helping with displaced persons. In 1947, after a year in Germany, he was discharged and returned to California, where he returned to Stanford and graduated with a degree in economics in 1949. Joe and Peggy married in July of 1949. While Mom was finishing school, Dad decided to build a self-serve gas station in San Jose. He had noticed that in LA, that there weren't any in Northern California. This was the first of many ideas Dad picked up in LA. After Mom graduated, they moved to LA to work for Grandpa Zukin. Dad realized almost immediately that he didn't want to take over his dad's business. After he quit, since they had a year lease in their apartment, he filled in his time working for General Motors. You heard the story, repossessing cars. Then Joe went into business with Glenn Holpe. They started a car wash in 1952. After they opened, Dad and Glenn took a few odd jobs while they were getting things going. They were a little short of cash. One of the jobs was working in a cannery during tomato season. Dad and Glenn would later laugh about the inspectors in their white coats checking the insect count in the canned tomato products. They thought they would never be able to eat ketchup again. They also sold garbage disposals, door to door for a time. Dad told the story that they would demonstrate how good the garbage disposal worked by putting glass and grinding up the glass into the disposal. He only sold a few, he said. In 1955, he took a trip with some friends to Disneyland with the idea of looking at a parking garage, thinking they might build one. Later, when our family had visited Knott's Berry Farm, and that's where he got the idea of possibly building a family-themed amusement park. Dad had trouble getting sophisticated investors interested in his idea, so he hired a group of salesmen to sell shares of Frontier Village stock door to door. He had hundreds of mom and pop shareholders, which made for very interesting shareholders meetings. They put in $50 and they owned a part of the company, right? They started to build in 1960 and opened in 1961. Dad would always say, surround yourself with good people and teach them how to run the business the way you want it run. One of Frontier Village's first employees was Warren Weitzel, who started working for the Zukins, mowing the lawn in our home on Manor Way, Los Altos. Warren's one of our speakers. In 1967, Dad heard about a man named Ron Cleveland who had a billboard company in Merced that was for sale. He bought it. Dad left Frontier Village in 1978 and moved to Fresno to run Cleveland. Then Frontier Village was closed in 1980. In 1981, Dad acquired Meadow Outdoor, and the business continues to grow even today. In 1990, he married Carol and increased his family by 4. Annalise, Abel, Miles, and Zach. Joe and Carol lived in Sebastopol for over 25 years. Dad passed away on December the 4th, 2018 in Santa Rosa. A few years ago, I started interviewing Dad for the purpose of writing his life story. Many of the things I've shared today came directly from those interviews. I asked Dad if he ever worried about going broke. He said he didn't have any fears about that. If one of his businesses didn't work out, or if he went broke, he knew he could just get a job. He had a lot of confidence. He said, my parents would tell me, Joe, you could do anything. I asked Dad what he would like to pass on to his posterity. It took me a long time to get these answers out. He wanted to talk about things that happened, not about things to pass on. His response was, have good manners. We're laughing, but it's so true, because he had impeccable manners. Even my children are grateful for learning table manners. Like my son Joe, on his first prom date, came home and thanked me for teaching him table manners. About 25 years ago. I'm grateful for that. Dad always stood up for a woman who entered the room. Always held the door for others. Those good old-fashioned gentlemanly manners. His advice to his children: choose what you want to do in life, and don't let others choose it for you. Naturally, others will influence you, especially your parents and your friends. But be an individual. Be decent, straightforward, and candid with people, and don't hurt anyone else. I recently asked Dad what brings happiness. He said, I'm happy when my kids are happy. I'm unhappy when one of my kids are unhappy. I'm happy when I feel good. Even having a nice meal, all these simple things. My outlook on life is simple. I asked Dad, who are the people who influenced you the most in your life? He said, my parents, my children, Peggy and Carol. Even though I'm sad that my dad is not with us, I feel an overwhelming gratitude for what he gave us. He gave us so many wonderful experiences, teachings, support, love, and opportunities. Thank you, Dad. I will miss you.
Boy, our experiences of Dad are so consistent. I said all the same things that my brother and or I'm about to that my brother and sister said. My name's John Zukin. I'm the pickle in the middle. Before I start, I wanted to thank Mike and Carol and Ann for doing so much to put this together. And I wanted to thank everyone else for being here. I'm grateful to be here to honor my father and be surrounded by so many people that loved him. If I were to list all of Dad's accomplishments, that list could never reflect the depth of his character. His integrity, his kindness, his generosity, and so many other characteristics that made him so special. Dad loved his family, his friends, and of course he really loved business. He was the most curious, most interested person I ever met. He had a unique way of elevating those around him. Dad made others feel important. And I think a lot of that was because he was such a good listener. One of the greatest pleasures I had in my work day were the virtually daily talks I had with Dad. As has been mentioned, Dad loved the details and would listen to business stories with laser-focused interest. You had his undivided attention, especially if you were going to be talking about billboards. Even after Dad officially handed the daily operations of our business over to his sons, he continued to be my most valuable and favorite advisor, and the company's most valuable asset. It's going to take more than a couple of us to pull the wagon he left. I believe that the reasons Dad was so successful was that not only was he great at seeing the big picture, he had a powerful mental focus on details. I got a little story. Dad loved his family and had ultimate faith in his kids, sometimes unwarranted. For example, Dad supported the pursuit of higher education. One school I was considering was the University of Nevada at Reno. Dad had recently obtained his pilot's license and insisted that we fly over there for a campus tour. Unbeknownst to me, Dad had convinced the University of Nevada ski coach to give us the tour. Because in Dad's eyes, I was going to be the next Jean-Claude Killy. The coach asked me about my racing history and my skiing abilities. And I told him at 12 I'd come in second at a NASCAR race at Alpine Meadows. The coach looked baffled. I was obviously completely embarrassed, but Dad just looked at me and beamed. Manners have been mentioned. Table manners and manners in general were super important to Dad. He wanted all of us to have the advantage that manners would provide us in life. However, none of these rules ever applied to his pets, especially Benny. And a little story. There was a gathering at Dad and Carol's. There was a lot of people in the main room, and for dessert there was some ice cream cones. And when Nikki, where are you, Nikki? When Nikki was about this big, he was probably about 6. We figured out, didn't we? When Nikki was about 6, he was walking through the crowd with his ice cream cone. And Benny walked along and took a big old lick off that ice cream cone. And Dad yelled, no, Carol yelled, Joe, get Benny, he's getting Nikki's ice cream cone. And Dad said, hey, wait a minute. Nikki's holding it at his level. What do you expect? For the rest of the party, Nikki went and got a refill and walked around like this with his ice cream cone straight up in the air. Even though as a young man, Dad was very busy building his business, he made the time to create childhood memories for me, and my experience of him included sailing in Balboa and providing that house there on Abalone, skiing at Tahoe and Jackson, planting vegetable gardens, playing catch, teaching me to play dominoes, his favorite game, rowing in Golden Gate Park for my 10th birthday, and taking me to see Willie Mays, my childhood hero. At a very young age, Dad wanted to instill in us the value of a strong work ethic. So he paid me 20 cents a pair to polish his shoes. I remember being 8 or 9, polishing these big shoes, and wondering if I'd ever be able to fill them. The older I get, the more I realize how lucky I was to have had Joe Zukin as a role model. I've been so fortunate in so many ways to have been his son. I'm going to miss him.
Hi, I'm Mary Zukin. Next in line after John Zukin. Thank you. Dear Dad, I found the perfect Father's Day card for you this year. It said, "I love you, Dad, but we don't have to talk about it." But I'm going to anyway. It has been the greatest honor and blessing to have had you as my dad. Growing up, I hardly knew you. I could never figure out what you would be doing in your office so much. I did love going to Frontier Village with you. I would make my way happily through the park from the entrance to your office to the mine ride and the arcade, and would be greeted cheerfully by the cowboys and cowgirls there, and by the office people. I was such a lucky kid. My dad made that whole place happen. I knew I was lucky, I just didn't know how lucky. A good friend of yours took it upon himself to enlighten me. One night, when you and Mom were having a party, I was outside on the front porch hanging out with Lucky Bordenave. I had complained to him about whatever 14-year-olds do regarding parents. I wasn't expecting what happened next. Lucky exploded. He was not angry, he was livid. He got my attention. Lucky took it upon himself to teach me about you. He took me to the other side of the tracks. We attended the church that you helped. He took me to the homes of the people you affected. He told me about how you stood up for him when prejudiced developers wouldn't sell to him in an all-white neighborhood. You changed lives with your generosity and your commitment to what is right. I had had no idea you were contributing in this way. And Dad, thank you for having taken the job of parenting so seriously. I don't think there's anything you left out. The lectures covered lessons about everything. We learned about integrity and a lot about thinking with discernment. I'd give anything now to hear it all again. I want to make sure I got it all straight. Sometimes within the last few years, I'd noticed you looking a little sheepish when one of us would bring up the subject of the lectures. Let me make this perfectly clear. Dad, you did everything so well. A few times you talked about how there would be people you would meet who have qualities you might want to emulate. Well, Dad, you're that person for me. Your death has inspired me to be a better person. Your spirit lives on in all of us now. I love you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
Hi, I'm Mike Zukin, the youngest and the tallest. Can you hear me? Yeah? So thanks for coming to celebrate. This is really a celebration. He had such a great life, remarkable life. I got the wrong glasses on. Hold on a sec. Gosh, Mary. Whew. Okay. Okay, so there's only 4 more of us left to speak, so we're getting there, all right? There's gonna be food and drink right after. And we have 3 hours, but to do this properly, I think we probably need about 3 days, you know, it's a wait, Irish wait. So everyone Joe touched was fortunate to have known him. His wives, his kids, his friends, his colleagues, employees, and his grandchildren. We all won the Joe lottery. He was a mentor in life and business. He was a gentleman. He would listen without judging and offer advice only when asked. He taught by example, but not always intentionally. He was loyal and loving, but sometimes had a Mr. Magoo quality. Which reminds me of a story about his dog Benny and my son Sam. We were in Sebastopol, and Sam was about a year old and toddling around. Benny was a 70-pound yellow lab, I think. And he walked by Sam and knocked him over. And Sam bonked his head on the hearth and kind of let out a wail. And Joe and Laura both looked, and Dad said, "Benny, are you all right?" True story. True story. Despite this massive blind spot, I knew he really cared. I knew he really cared for kids and had a deep compassion for people. A great example was when I confided to him that Sam and Jack, 14 and 17 at the time, had been mixing it up a little bit, quarreling a lot. He wrote the following letter to them. And I think it's applicable to all, but I think it's applicable to all siblings, Meg, and friends, and people, and anybody that you consider who your family is, because it's not always your blood. So I'm going to read the letter, so thanks for indulging. I don't even know if he sent it, but I think he did. So, well, you're going to get it now, buddy. We found it. Dear Jack and Sam, the other day your dad and I were talking about the Zukin family. Going way back to my father and your great-grandfather, Joseph Zukin Sr., he met and married my mother and your great-grandmother, Helen Niederlander, in 1924. My brother Bob and I were born soon after. We had no other siblings. We were raised in what was then known as West Los Angeles in a home called The Castle. My dad had bought 4 acres of land in the country in LA and built his house while he was still a bachelor. It was cozy, but comfortable for all of us living there. I am 2 years and 3 months older than Bob, but in the first 5 to 15 years of your lives, that seemed like a big spread, and it made big difference to each of us. We had a different set of friends and different interests. I remember playing together a lot in our bedroom. We had a train set and all kinds of toys, which you were required to put together and take apart and then rebuild again. Once in a while, we fought over what game we were going to play or some other trivial matter. Sometimes we got physical and pounded on each other. Our parents were patient and tolerant. They kept urging us to respect each other and we would be brothers for life. They were right. We went to the same high school, but seldom were together. After high school, we went to different colleges and into different military services. On top of that, I moved to Northern California and Bob stayed in Southern California. We didn't get together very often during the first 10 years or so after college, but kept in touch, mainly through our parents. It was during that time that we probably started to miss each other's company. We each pursued different occupations, but would often communicate with each other about business. As our parents aged, we became more involved with their well-being and with each other. We began working together and making decisions together concerning family and business matters. We saw the importance of the two of us taking care of our parents' well-being. We became not only brothers, but friends, and deferred to one another during decision-making discussions. After our parents had died, we were catering to families of our own. Over the years since your Zukin great-grandparents have passed away, Bob and I have experienced true brotherhood. He's one of my best friends, and I'm one of his. I cherish his friendship. I love my brother. I encourage you to love yours and support each other. It is a warm and comfortable feeling to have a brother's shoulder to lean on. So there you go. Okay, just two more quick ones. One quick story that illustrates the dynamic of the Zukin household in my early days, which I don't remember a whole lot of those, but it centers around the one and only time that Joe allowed me to fish at the fishing pond at Frontier Village. And I was like Mary, I was there every weekend. I thought every parent had at Frontier Village, and I was like, this is the greatest place ever. My dad just lets me go. He's up there working away, and I went to the fishing pond. I think I caught about 7 fish. And I showed him, I brought him up, I showed it to him, and he looked at me, and he said, Mike, you know you've got to eat those fish. And that wasn't good. So that night we put the fish in the freezer, and every time I opened that freezer for days and weeks after, I saw those fish. Those dreaded fish. My life was ruined. Then one day I opened the freezer and the fish were gone. I never knew what happened to the fish. To this day, I thank my mom for having the courage to envision getting rid of those fish. But I learned another lesson. 2, be careful what you wish for, or fish for. But the second one was thank God for moms. I think what I'll miss most about Joe is driving to Sebastopol. Driving to Sebastopol around dinner time and sitting down with him and Carol over cocktails, martini, gin, vodka tonic, crackers, cheese, just the 3 of us, and talking about life and business, just about anything would be fun. He was curious, he was interesting and interested. He had uncanny recall and could recount details of numerous stories. He was remarkably lucid at 92. Incredible. In the end, when I think of Joe, I think of something one of my college friends would say about his aging father. He would say that his dad would never die. That's exactly how I feel about Joe. He'll never die. He was bigger than life, and he will live on in all of us. I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything.
Hi, I'm Zachary Eisentraut, Carol's youngest son. I'd like to thank you guys for giving me a chance to talk, and I thank Joe for taking a chance on a single mom with 4 kind of crazy kids back in, and it's funny when you talk about manners, and I think that's one of the things we lacked the most at 10 and 11, and that he could see something in us and his support, and that was always special. And 39 years later, you never know what. relationships going to evolve into, and how you're going to become a part of another family. And that's kind of the most special thing that's happened for us, I think. So, but I'll just treasure kind of all the kind of day-to-day things we did together, and just talking and playing dominoes and playing golf and just doing things together, and kind of like a lot of his kids have said about, his advice was always kind of in a subtle way, and you would get it out of the conversation you had while you're doing something else, and then also the love and support and confidence in us to do things. So it's been a special thing, and that's all I'm going to say today. Thank you.
Wow. Following the Zukin family is quite a challenge, quite a challenge. My name is Warren Weitzel, and on behalf of the Frontier Village contingent, I've been asked to say a few words about Joe. I have a collection of 57 years of stories and memories, but I'll keep it brief, I'll keep it short. I met Joe when I interviewed to work at Frontier Village. At the time, I was too young, and during the interview, Joe asked me what I did, and I told him I mowed lawns. It was there that I met Peggy and Mary and the Zukin family, and Hans and Fritz, their two dogs. Frontier Village opened in 1961. We were all young and inexperienced in park management, but Joe took us under his wing, and he taught us business relations and human relations and how to manage a park. We followed his lead, and we were better for it. He was an excellent teacher, mentor, leader, with high standards and high expectations. As young folks, we were anxious to learn his many life, business, and human relations skills. Joe never criticized. He always would listen. And he was asked thoughtful questions to make us stretch and grow. He used the Socratic method, layered thinking. The quality of our answers were based on the depth of Joe's questions. He wanted to ensure that we had examined all facets of our thoughts and ideas. He was a builder of good character and leadership, and he instilled in us a feeling of self-worth. Joe served with the 9th Infantry Division. I'm proud to say that I was also a member of the 9th Infantry Division, and Joe gave me his shoulder patch when I went to Vietnam. As a second lieutenant, as Ann has said, he was stationed as a relocation officer in Austria, and his job was to help return the citizens to their country of origin. And Ann has very graciously captured her father's military history. When deciding what to say about Joe, a friend suggested that I not personalize my comments by speaking about myself. But it was a good suggestion, but how does one separate Joe's strong influence from ourselves? Joe's teachings, philosophies, and beliefs are ingrained in all of us. And that was the beauty of this great man. He's a part of who we all are, and we are all touched by Joe. We have been molded and shaped by his positive influences. So as we go our separate ways, we will carry Joe's profound wisdoms and influences with us. He will always be a part of us in our memories and thoughts. His many life teachings and philosophies we will carry with us. His guiding hand will always be on our shoulder, and he will occasionally be whispering in our ear. Joe will be our Jiminy Cricket. Joe's a dear friend, mentor, and we love and miss him. Thank you, Peggy, Carol, and family. May God bless you.
Look good, Mike?
Feels good.
Thank you. My name is Jim Moravec. I'm quite honored to be asked to speak at this service today. Joe is only 3 days and 30 years older than me. So I guess I always knew this day was coming. That fact, however, does not make it any easier. And I, like all of you, miss him a great deal. Joe is a great guy. Having the opportunity to know and work with Joe over the past 32 years was my life's great good fortune. Joe was a man I admired. He was a mentor, a partner, and a friend. I have countless memories of Joe that I will always cherish. Joe had an unyielding curiosity about the people and the situations he encountered. I listened many times to Joe exhibiting true wonder as he spoke with people, ranging from bankers to attorneys to business people to our waitress at lunch or our waiter at lunch. He was always enthusiastic as he learned about them, their positions and their thoughts on various matters. This lifelong curiosity and the pursuit of information made Joe the smartest guy in the room until the day of his passing. And that is absolutely the truth. There were times when we'd be in a business meeting and he may not be as quick as he was once 20 or 30 years ago, but as he developed his thoughts, he was definitely the smartest guy in the room, and we all admired him a great deal for that. Always, regardless of the seriousness of a conversation, Joe had an attitude that we were going to find an element of fun and enjoyment in the situation. That was nothing that he never needed to say that. It's just who he was and the way he conducted things. We were going to have fun. We were going to find enjoyment in what we were doing, and I so appreciated that. Joe had a very clever little sense of humor. And I do mean a little sense of humor. because Joe's sense of humor was always extremely subtle and delivered with a wry grin and a little twinkle in his eye as he sat back, making you laugh. This was exhibited in many ways, oftentimes in the small wagers that Joe and I would make on major sporting events. One March or April, the Super Bowl had passed 2 or 3 months earlier. My team had won. Joe and I were talking on the phone, and I happened to ask him, I had not seen my dollar yet. And I asked Joe, so Joe, I think you owe me $1 from the Super Bowl. And he exclaimed, no, Jim, I paid you that $1. Said, oh, okay, well, I don't remember, Joe. He says, well, I'm pretty sure I paid you the $1. It's like, okay. So that passed, we went on to other important topics of the day. And I thought, that Super Bowl wager, that's over. Until a couple days later, I come to my desk, and here's a letter from Joe Zukin, Sebastopol, California, addressed to myself. The business mail had come in for the day. It sought out advertising. This had been placed specifically on my desk because it's a small white envelope with a red stamp that says confidential. So of course I see this and it's like, well, what is this all about? I open up and out falls a brand new dollar bill, nice and crispy, and a note. The note reads, and I'm sure Joe won't mind me sharing this with you. It's been in my Joe file for a long time now. Jim, since my experience with the boss at Precious Cheese Company in the early 1960s, I've been doubly sure that I don't welsh on a bet. So I'm enclosing another $1. for our Super Bowl wager. I have no idea what happened in the first mailing, but it's certainly possible that I dreamed about sending it to you. Okay? So here you go. Please acknowledge receipt. Joe. It was always such precious time to spend any amount of time with Joe during the course of a business day. Particularly overnight travel was always a ton of fun. But as you went through a day, just started looking forward to lunch. You anticipated lunch. And it wasn't so much the food we were going to eat; it was the time to sit down and just converse and catch up on things. And I really cherish those one-on-one lunches with Joe. Those were the highlight of a week or a month, whatever the case might be. But one day at lunch, I again wanted to share with Joe some exciting news that I had, and it revolved around my having found the perfect money clip. And Joe was quite impressed with the money clip. You know, we were trying to get rid of the big bulking wallets out of our pockets because they're bad for your spinal column and whatnot. And so Joe was quite impressed. He took the money clip from me and looked at it and admired it and kind of took in the credit cards and took out my driver's license and looked at it and admired the quality of the leather, the stitching, very high quality stitching, the magnet. Joe went through all this, and I sat there at lunch across the table from him talking about it. And then he took out my money. and he kind of started thumbing through my money. And it's like, I was wondering, okay, where's this going? And Joe looks at it, and he's holding my money. He looks up at me and says, Jim, is a 20 the largest denomination it holds? And there's that sense of humor, the wry grin, the twinkle in the eye. Well, today, and over the years, Joe always noticed there was a $100 bill at the front of my money clip. I never spent it. It's always the same $100 bill, but it's always there. Joe was a kind, caring, and gracious man. He took the time to make people feel they were important and that they mattered. I witnessed that time and time again with staff at our office, with restaurant servers, hotel desk clerks, and with my wife Laura and our girls. Joe made everyone's day a little bit brighter. Like all of you, I miss him a great deal, but I am so very, very thankful for having known him and the memories and the lessons that he left with me. Thank you very much.
You're going to pull it down, is that it?
Maybe. What do you think?
Oh, I think as low as it can go. Thank you, Mike.
Want to get it inside there?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Got it? Thank you. What an experience for me this is. It's so wonderful to hear what so many of the things that were buzzing around in my head and that I'm going to explain to you in the next 15 or 20, no, in the next minute or so. My feeling about Joe was, and it's reflected in what the rest of you have said, that he enriched lives. He certainly enriched my life, and he enriched the lives of so many other people who were working with us at Empire Broadcasting. He was a wonderful man, and he just saw to it that we were better for having known him. Yet despite that fact, it's funny that we met not in the normal way, but as competitors. We were both in the radio business, and we both wanted very much to buy another radio station. There was a specific radio station. Thank heavens I've forgotten all about it. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it was, what its call letters were, or what city it was in. But Joe and I both wanted that damn radio station. And we competed very hard for it. What we didn't know was that the seller really was having fun with us. And that was the nature of our competition. We both lost. Only for a while. About a year later, Joe, somehow or other, worked his way around that other man and got the radio station. And I'm very happy that he did. Joe enriched our lives in many ways. I've said, first of all, he enriched my life as a competitor, which is kind of funny. He also enriched my life as a client. I had a radio station, and he advertised on that radio station for that wonderful, what do we call it? Well, the excuse me? Frontier Village. Frontier Village, of course, which he, I think, put together really for kids. But I loved it. I loved going to it, and through that experience at Frontier Village, and his being a client of ours, a radio client, I learned more about Joe and was enriched in still another way. You know, radio stations do a lot of promoting, and nobody was more in line with promoting a radio station or anything else than Joe. The ideas just sparked. He had a different idea every day. The best one, I think, or one that most of us don't forget, that few of us do forget, was the donkey race. Now this was a race in which he decided that 3 or 4 of our disc jockeys would sit on donkeys and take off at the county well, the county fairgrounds. Thank you. Could you be with me all the time when it was great because the 4 disc jockeys, or maybe there were 3 of them, and you might remember some of their names. Maybe I don't. Ross McGowan, who went on to television later on, Dave Sholin, and John McLeod. Yes. John, incidentally, wishes he were here today, but he's ill, and he sends his condolences and best wishes. At any rate, these 3 or 4 disc jockeys got on the donkeys at the fairgrounds, went down, what is that street?
Monterey Road.
No, before they got to Monterey Road.
Cali Expressway.
Well, at any rate, they left the fairgrounds, and all of them on their, can't help but say it, their donkeys, until they got to Monterey Road, and then they turned left and had a terrific traffic jam, and finally entered the amusement park. That was a great promotion, and we all remember it. And it was Joe's. It was the sort of thing that Joe did for us all the time. It was a different promotion and at different times, but he was deeply involved in them. He was a great guy. He also, I'm talking about how he enriched our lives. And I've just said that he enriched our lives as a client. Well, he also enriched our lives. Let me get the light here. Oh, here it is. As a, oh, you think I really don't mean this because I can't read it, but I do. He especially enriched our lives because in a way that I personally enjoyed, which was that we had lunch very frequently. And of course, what you have said about him in the last few minutes makes it unnecessary for me to add what I obviously gained through those luncheons. They were fun, but I learned about radio, I learned about life, I learned about business, and they were wonderful luncheons. I had one objective in those luncheons, and that was to try to get Joe to become a shareholder of ours. It took me a long time, many lunches, but finally it happened, and he did say, okay, I'm going to put some money into your company. And that was great, because the next step, obviously, was that we were able to ask him to become a member of our board of directors. And he was very valuable at that. I'd like to tell you one story in which his value really shone. I had taken a trip to Hong Kong. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful city. And by the way, although this has very little to do with it, I got to add that one of the things that I love about Hong Kong is the billboards. I knew that would strike a chord. Especially, and I'm going to say something now that not everybody will agree with, but everybody in this room better agree with it. And that is that billboards are not in style. They are not in style with the people who run some cities. For example, when I arrived in San Jose, nobody liked billboards, and every effort that they possibly could make, they applied to get rid of billboards. And I want to tell you with some pride that I editorialized in favor of billboards many, many times and was laughed at because of it. But you know what? Billboards are pretty much in again in San Jose. So where was I? I was talking about Hong Kong. Since I was a radio guy, I listened to the radio a lot, even in Hong Kong. And I was immediately taken with the fact that I was listening to radio stations that were virgins. They had not yet learned anything about top 40 radio, which, as most of you in the room know, was the kind of radio that took over markets here in the United States for many years. And so the thought immediately struck me, by golly, we ought to buy one of these radio stations, and we ought to become international broadcasters, because we would obviously, inserting the format of top 40, become the top 40, the top radio station in the market. And I could hardly wait until I got back to my board of directors and to tell them about this radio station that I knew was located in a building right next to the hotel that I was in. Well, they didn't agree with me. You know, during that period, it was 1996, we had just 4 years before the British lost Hong Kong, and it was to be taken over by the Chinese. And if you've been reading the papers recently, there's some problems that they're having over there in connection with, not with radio so much, but with the imposition of the Chinese people on those who were in Hong Kong. So the feeling was that it made no sense at all for me to try to buy a radio station there on behalf of our company. And I think Joe said it best. Joe said, you know, Bob, you think the Federal Communications Commission is a little restrictive, and you're unhappy about it. Wait till you get a radio station in China, communist China, and you'll know all about it. Well, that was the end of that. And that was obviously Joe, and another aspect, another reason why I can say that my life was very definitely, in another way, enriched. Or let's put it another way, I didn't lose my shirt as I would have. So Joe was somebody who constantly did great things that affected our lives. When Joe and Carol moved to Sebastopol, Joe continued to come to our meetings with great frequency and to play his role in the board of directors of Empire Broadcasting. After a while, however, he felt that he should turn it over to Mike and have Mike represent his company and his family. And only in the last few months did we not see see Joe on a regular basis, and we missed him. Yes, he enriched the lives of so many of us. And I think that we all gained from seeing and living with, or being with, working with a man whose life was really a great success, and who, despite the great success, was kind and graceful in everything that he did. We learned a lot from him. We were enriched by him. Miss you, Joe.